As Paul Wells signifies in his book Understanding Animation, he states, "Clearly in the contemporary era, the animated film has a much higher profile, chiefly through the continuing domination of the Disney studios, the proliferation of cartoons and mainstream television, and the popularity of Japanese manga films. In many senses, however, this creates as many problems as it apparently resolves. This scenario still consigns the animated film to its traditional children audience, defines the animated film as a cartoon, and sustains a view of animation as something which merely fills time in the schedules or appeals of marginalised tastes. Animation is a particularly interesting type of filmmaking that evokes strong emotions out of cinema audiences, and for this essay I want to specifically examine the emotionalism that's used in the films of Pixar Animation Studios. The first aspect of Pixar's emotionalism is within their film's characters. This can be signified by Murray Smith, who once wrote, "Characters are central to the rhetorical and aesthetic effects of narrative texts. Character structures are perhaps the major way in which narrative texts solicit our assent for particular values, practices, and ideologies." From Smith's analysis of character, we can apply this to Pixar films. Pick any Pixar film you want and you can find the same element. For each film revolves around a particular character or characters and the journey that they undergo, whether it's a story of enemies becoming friends, two friends returning an innocent home, a father searching for his son, a dreamer wanting to achieve their dream, or even a character discovering the bigger picture of life. On top of this, Pixar specifically used their technology in 3D animation to craft specific emotions within characters, and most notably, their faces. This is further supported by Angela Tinwell, who states, "In addition to a specific facial expression of emotion, such as anger or happiness, the physiology of the face allows for different emotions to be portrayed independently in different areas of the face at the same time." We can assert Tinwell's view of the face in animation and motion capture in Pixar films very easily. Take Monsters, Inc. for example. Within the film, the character of Sully, played by John Goodman, displays a multitude of different emotions throughout the film. He displays feelings of happiness, fear, frustration, anger, courage, and sadness. And from this, Tinwell's argument as well as Smith's point about the character can be easily proven correct when discussing Pixar's films. So now we understand about characters in Pixar films. Now to look at the next point in the way of displaying their emotionalism through narrative. A film's narrative is the key story to the film that piques an audience's intrigue to that specific film. As mentioned earlier, Pixar create films that aim to appeal to a mass audience age range. This is demonstrated on the Pixar Weebly website that infers, Pixar's films speak passionately to the audience. They share emotional stories that resonate with everyone and include relatable characters. Technology is not the goal for Pixar. Their goal is to make a good movie, heavily focused on the characters and the story. This has differentiated Pixar from other animation studios who focus on displaying their technological advancements to the audience. As the Weebly online website signifies, unlike other animation studios, Pixar choose to tell narratives with a mass appeal. This is largely down to the choice of storytelling that Pixar approaches. Pixar tell more day-to-day based relatable stories, as we can see from a variety of their films. For this, a film I want to really explore the narrative of is Finding Nemo, released in 2003. Finding Nemo's narrative revolves around Marlin, a father whose son Nemo is kidnapped by deep-sea divers, and Marlin must travel far and wide to find his son and rescue him. The film is interesting as it heavily looks upon the universal dilemma of all adult parents having to one day let your child go into the big scary outside world to grow up away from the safety of their home and parental care. From Finding Nemo, and Marlin's narrative journey of being an overprotective father towards Nemo to becoming a more open parent, allowing his son to go off to school and onto new adventures, brings his character arc and narrative of the universal dilemma full circle. So now we've covered character and narrative as distinctive ways of conveying emotionalism in Pixar. But what about more specific production choices? Of course, I'm talking about the mise-en-scène of their films. Mise-en-scène can be best described by John Gibbs, who states, "They include lighting, costume, decor, properties, and the actors themselves. The organisation of the contents of the frame encompasses the relationship of the actors to one another and to the decor, but also their relationships to the camera and thus the audience's view. Mise-en-scène is a critical part of the creation of a feature film, and of course this also applies to animation. An element of mise-en-scène that I want to specifically examine more in depth is the use of colour in Pixar. Animation has a much more rich and distinctive use of colour in film than live action, as the technology can allow for more range of colour grading than live action films can provide. One of the best uses of colour in a Pixar film is seen in Inside Out, released in 2015. As explained best by Robert Mills, colour can have political, religious and cultural connotations, represent gender and, as believed by Vasily Kandinsky, have emotional and physical effects on us. Colour can also improve our memory, influence buying decisions, indicate meaning and tell stories. In the case of Inside Out and its approaches to colour, we can get a rich, in-depth understanding of the characters and narrative of Inside Out just on the basis of understanding Pixar's use of colour in the film. Each of the 5 major emotions are coloured specifically to a colour that appropriates that particular emotion. Sadness is blue, a colour often thought to be depressing and sad. Anger is red, displaying rage and fury and so on. However, the most unusual character is Joy, whose primary colour is yellow, representing her joyful happiness, but she also has tones of the other 4 characters' emotional colours. She has blue hair and blue eyes to represent sadness, which Joy shows towards the end of the film, as well as a green dress to signify her disgust at other characters, particularly sadness and her attitude throughout the film, as well as a hue glow that surrounds her has tints of anger red and fear purple. So from this, the use of colour, we can immediately understand Joy's significance as the film's key emotion and key protagonist in the journey she and Sadness undertake. In addition to this is the imaginary friend character of Bing Bong. Bing Bong is a blend of 2 very different colours, pink representing hope and brown representing neglect. This is significant because in the story Bing Bong presents Joy and Sadness with hope of returning back to headquarters, but also neglect as his brown clothing is reminiscent of a homeless person that has been forgotten, which literally ends up being his death near the end of the film, as this neglect causes him to disappear forever. So in terms of colour, Pixar have a clever use of it to display emotionalism within characters and the narrative arc of their films, which can touch audiences emotionally. One more element that I want to cover in discussing Pixar's use of emotionalism is their use of music. Music is a vital part of any film, and not just animation. This is explained best by Claudia Gordman, who infers, "Music lessens defences against the fantasy structures to which narrative provides access. It increases the spectator's susceptibility to suggestion. The cinema has been compared to hypnosis, since both induce a kind of trance. Film music lowers thresholds of belief. This begins to explain why it has continued to be indispensable even to realist narrative cinema." Film music is incredibly subjective, and this is no exception to animation. A perfect example of music in a Pixar film is the married life sequence from Up. In Up, the iconic married life sequence is heavily made because of Michael Giacchino's beautiful score to the scene. He brilliantly uses an array of different feels in the sequence, including happiness, grief, contempt, and sadness. From just Giacchino's score, we can understand everything that the scene shows as it plays out. In many ways, the scene works much better with music and no dialogue. The animators and Giacchino thus created a highly emotional 5-minute scene that essentially can work as a short film by itself, looking at the long married life between the characters of Ellie and Carl, which demonstrates perfectly how Pixar create emotionalism in their films. So to sum up, overall, Pixar Animation Studios have and still do create animation films that have mass appeal to film audiences of all ages, with engaging characters and narratives that carry strong emotional significance, as well as their use of production values, including the mise-en-scène and the music, allows audiences to experience the distinctive emotional traits of Pixar films. Pixar films continue to display their emotional, distinctive style and storytelling abilities that will forever resonate within film audiences.